I like it to see people who ruffle feathers, who step on toes, who rock the boat. As long as they're not my feathers, my toes, or my boat. Don't we all do that? Now, prophets were those feather rufflers, those troubling and shaking the boats and stepping on toes. But not just for trouble's sake. They did it because something was not right. Something was not fair. Something was not good. And we see that in our children, and in each one of us, we have instilled in us a deep sense of fairness. What is right and what is wrong. What is being, when someone is treated fairly with respect and dignity, and when someone is not. So prophets do that. And it is good trouble that they cause. It's almost like think of a baby that is not well because it needs something, being changed or hungry or whatever. Well, you hear the baby at some point. And in the same shrieking voice, sometimes you may hear the prophets holding up the mirror and saying something is not right with society, with this law, with this custom, with whatever it is they hold up the mirror to. So John the Baptist was one of those prophets. Well, and for those who are in power, in government, those who are the established class, they don't like prophets. I like prophets when they step on someone else's toes, not on mine. Who loves them when the mirror is held up to you from a prophet? Now, our Bible, it's so interesting. In the Old Testament, we have two big parts of our Hebrew scripture. One is what we call the law. Moses stood as the lawgiver, and law in the Hebrew Jewish understanding is always guidance, God's good guidance. It's almost like our Constitution as the United States of America. We always come back to affirm what is put in black on white in the Constitution. And that's meant just for the Jewish people and for us as Christians to come back to the basic guidance of the living God. That's the law. And then there are the prophets. That's the other big group and part in the Old Testament who kind of say, you got away from that guidance. You're not living up to God's good guidance. You're missing the point if you do not care for the vulnerable, if you treat someone who looks differently than you differently, if, and they do all of this and enumerate and put up and lift up all the parts where we, the establishment then, or we right now today, are not living up to God's good guidance. Now, prophets don't have to be the people of old from the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures. They're prophets who live today among us. And one of those prophets whom I consider a prophet is Greta Thunberg. You heard about her. Some of you may shake your head and think of, oh my dear, here again he goes. Yeah. She's speaking up for what matters, where we leave God's good guidance to care for God's creation and get ourselves in trouble, our planet in trouble, the house is on fire. So Greta Thunberg is one of the good troublemakers in the sense of trying to wake us up and see how can we be better caretakers of God's creation. Regina Jonas was one of the good troublemakers as well. Before 1941, there was in the whole wide world no female rabbi around. No one. Well, she was the one who felt deeply called to this ministry to become a rabbi. Well, if you're the first one to try something and the first one to push the envelope and working toward that right, she faced challenges and challenges and challenges. But she did not give up. And right now, being a woman rabbi, it's normal. Right here in town, we have Nina Mendel with the congregation Beth El, female rabbi. Beautiful, caring, wonderful. Now, progress. We make progress as a nation, as a community, as a church, as worldwide humanity, when people like Greta and Regina and Martin Luther King Jr., when they push us and say, you can do better, you can return to the living God, how God intended creation to be, how God intended humanity to be, to recognize in each other's faces a sister and a brother. And that's who John the Baptist is, and that's who Jesus is as well. Jesus asked his disciples, those who were closest to him, who do people say I am? So Jesus is asking the questions. Who do people say I am? And the disciples listen around and they tell Jesus, some say you're Elijah. Some people say you're John the Baptist. Some people say you're another prophet. Now, Elijah, John the Baptist, and the other prophets, they were all prophets. So Jesus was a prophet in his own understanding and in the understanding of the people around him. And sometimes, yes, we try to domesticate, make prophets seem smoother and more comfortable to us. That was not who Jesus was during his time back then. So where and how are you and I invited to challenge the status quo like a prophet where it veers off from God's intention? Women's rights movement, just like Regina, first rabbi, it's even hard to grasp for you and me that just 100 years ago, or a couple more years than 100 years ago, women couldn't vote. Oh my dear, it's unbelievable. It took women and men who supported them to achieve this right. Prophets, challenging the status quo, the establishment, those who are too comfortable, too set in their ways to make a difference, to make a change. Same thing for civil rights. Same things for human rights globally in other countries and here at home. So when it comes to US-China relations, it's always human rights. One big issue for China: do you treat your minorities as human beings or not? Or do you push them out and away? LGBTQ rights, environmental rights, and the whole movements of justice, fairness, and rights. That's what prophets did, and that's what people do even today and right now when it comes to what is the right thing to do. Now, it has never been easy to be that one person to stand up and say, I disagree, that is not right, when you know the whole majority, they keep silent or don't say anything. Well, except if you're called Joanne Lauer. You don't have a problem speaking up, do you? No, you see, it's different for me. So I have a hard time being that one person, because I don't know why. Always have the tendency to see a little bit the other side too. And that's not, did I dig myself a grave here? One foot is in the grave, the other one slipping. No, I know, Joanne, you see the other side too. But you never give up your viewpoint, your conviction, just to appease others or to conform to the majority. And that's the difference. Are you willing to compromise our identity, our values, what is right, for the sake of the majority who may disagree? That sounds better than the other thing, doesn't it? And often, isn't it so often that the right things happen where we meet in the middle, where we shake hands, when we recognize the good in one another? We never do that with extremes. And I see eye rolling when you talk to some people about Marjorie Green. Exactly. When you talk to some people about AOC, we're meant to be together, come together with our gifts of groundedness, of faith, of God's guidance. At the same time, my friends, we need prophets who challenge, who hold up the mirror to make progress. Now, creativity and all, so important to it, but if you tell me, I don't like creativity in accounting, my checkbook, my account doesn't need a lot of innovation and creativity. Those numbers need to add up. That's a good thing. But there's creativity and innovation in other areas. Jesus was a prophet, especially when he spoke up for those who were hurting. And during those days, the people who were especially hurting were those who were not safe, who didn't have a financial foundation, who could not live on their own. The widows, the orphans, the strangers, they are the ones for whom Jesus spoke up and said, they are God's people. How you treat them, you treat God. Who and for whom are you and I called today to speak up for? What are the reasons, the values, God's good intent for which you are willing to stand up, ruffle feathers, step on toes, and rock the boat? Where and how are you willing to become a good troublemaker, as Jesus intended us all to become? What is so important to you in the footsteps of Jesus that you're willing to push the envelope? All the good prophets did it. Will we together do it too? That's why we sing, grant us wisdom, grant us courage. We need it, both wisdom and courage.